And so when she asked me in the car this time, she said, "Hey Ben, how are you doing?" It was like, I don't know if it was because had like kind of recently turned 18 and I was starting to feel like a man, or what. I don't know what it was specifically, but I remember thinking, I can't live my entire life as like a fraud. And that's what I had been doing, because no matter what, I would tell him I'm doing okay, even if I'm doing awful. And so I just said, like, I can't live like this for the rest of my life. And so I just told her straight up. I was like, I don't think I'm saved, Mom. I was so honest that I was just like, Mom, like, I kind of just want to have fun. And so I moved pretty much before I got kicked out. Now it was like, now no one's over my shoulder. Now.
Welcome, everybody, to the 20th episode of the Light It Up podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt. With us, we have Rafael Alvarez.
What's up, guys? How you guys doing?
And Benjamin Fussell, our guest for today.
Yo.
So before we get started, we just want to send out a quick celebration, a quick announcement. It's our 20th episode. We're very excited, very honored to have made it this far. We thank you guys for sticking with us, for giving us support. We love doing these episodes, and we're going to continue doing them and until the rapture happens. We'll see.
Hey, come on.
What's the anniversary already?
And it was not anniversary, but it's the 20th episode. I think
This is a big deal. This is a big right here.
Yeah,
That's pretty impressive.
20
episodes.
Pretty expensive. To be honest, I didn't expect this to last this long. I'm not trying to throw shade or anything. Like lately, I thought we were gonna come up with we're gonna run out of ideas to do something or something like that.
We're still going. Yeah, man. It's been super fun. Gosh, 7 months. It's been super fun. And we're gonna keep doing these. We're having a lot of fun. So today, Ben Fussell is our guest for today, and when we asked him what he wanted to talk about, he suggested his testimony, and the main subject, or the kind of overall subject of his testimony, not only did he backslide for a period of time in his life, but he also learned the difference between having a relationship with God and having God as your religion. And there's a big difference between that, because there's personal, and there's just the factor where it's just you're doing it as if to appease God and just a ritual. So we're going to get into that, and Ben is going to explain his personal experience on that and give his testimony. So without further ado, Ben, why don't you start off at the most an early point in your testimony?
Perfect. First of all, I would like to say thank you for having me on. This is an honor and a privilege. I was very privileged when you asked me to do this. Still, I'm just so grateful to be, even saved, even to have a relationship with God. So, most grateful for that, and any opportunity I get to kind of share my testimony. I mean, I'm completely honored. And 20 episodes is actually, don't quote me on this, but I was just listening to another podcast, and I'm pretty sure that like 80% of podcasts ever created don't make it past their 20th episode. So this
Wow.
is quite the milestone, to be honest. Like, and I was being generous on it. I think it's more. I think it's like closer to the 90 percentile, but
Wow.
I was safe and said like 80. So congrats for you guys. Like that was
Thanks,
tough.
bro. That's a
As
fact that I never knew that
Yeah,
it
me neither.
encourages
existed or
you,
something.
huh?
That's actually cool to
I know.
see that
Hey,
we're
keep going.
basically the 10%
Yeah,
of
You guys are
people
the
still want to do
10%.
it. That's
100%.
cool.
that's awesome.
Hey, so keep doing your thing, and yeah, that's awesome. So like he announced, my name is Benjamin Fussell. And so I grew up my testimony kind of starts is I grew up in church, uh, was born and raised. I was actually born in Houston, Texas, and my parents, Jerry and Glenda Fussell, were actually had a church down there, and so that's why I was born in Houston, Texas. But I only lived there for a few months, and then they moved back to Tucson, where I am now. And so I was born in Houston, but raised in Tucson, raised in the Tucson church under Pastor Warner, who was an amazing pastor. Golly, I'm blessed.
Yeah.
And so I grew up from, let's just say, 1 to 18, and in church, and kind of went through the whole uh, church kid scene. As far as I went to nursery, I went to faith roots. I was taught all up through my foundational years. I would say, like, during high school, um, is where I kind of started like getting that I needed to have like a personal relationship with Jesus. Even though I kind of didn't know all that meant, I had like the desire. I knew that I wanted to kind of serve God. I kind of caught little glimpses of like a vision for my life, I guess you could say, a purpose. And but overall, like, I didn't have a strong foundation. Even though I grew up in church, I wasn't completely surrendered to God. And so during my high school years, I really struggled. And there was different things that kind of would like were my struggles. And so it kind of, looking back on it, it kind of worked in like, I would say, 6 month cycles of like, I would kind of like be doing really bad, and then like I would get caught in my sin, because I would like, it would be secret sin, right? And I would get caught in my sin. And then after that, it was like I would get a glimpse of who I was after like my parents and like the pastors in the church kind of like had to talk to me about this sin, and I was caught out. So I would get really like, oh my gosh, I am a sinner. I need Jesus. And so there would be like, and that's a good revelation to have. But instead of like pushing me all the way to surrender to God, I would kind of just like repent, but I wouldn't press in. And so I would repent for, what I got caught for. I would continue living a little bit. And then eventually, since I didn't have those strong roots, I would start to slip back in. And then boom, I would get caught again. And then it's like another whole like, oh God, I need you. I need you. And so that kind of happened like all throughout my 4 years of high school. Excuse me. And there was one time where it kind of got serious, and I was kicked out of church actually because I was 18, and I was messing around with other people's salvation, which is a big no-no. I remember my dad telling me like, Ben, it's one thing to like jack up your own salvation, but when you start messing with other people's salvation and start causing other people to stumble, like now you're crossing lines with God. And so yeah, so it had to be dealt with. What I was doing had to be dealt with. So I got kicked out for a period, which is like no hard feelings to the pastors. Like I agreed with them. Like I completely understood from where they were coming from, and it was much needed. And so I said that to say, like, I was gone for this 3 months period, right? I kind of took it seriously for like the first half of it. I was like, at the time, thank God we did have a live stream and stuff. So I was watching live stream and doing all that. But then towards the end of it, I remember like it was kind of easy to slack off because I didn't have church there to keep me like accountable, I guess you could say. And so I really started like slipping into my sin. To eventually, I was just not living for God, right? And this is when I was 18 still. And I remember my mom, it was one specific night. She like took me on a drive. She said, "Hey Ben, like let's go on a drive." And so I'm real close with my mom, so it wasn't like weird or anything. And so we went on a drive and we kind of like chatted here and there. But then I remember thinking like, no, like this isn't what she wants. Like she doesn't just want this small talk. But anyway, we pulled back up to my house. So we've already been on this long drive, kind of just a lot of small talk. But in front of my house, she just asked me, she said, "So Ben, like how are you doing?" And I guess I just know them. I know my parents. And she's not asking like, how's the job going? How are how are the kids? Just kidding.
Yeah.
Like I don't have any kids. But
Yeah.
but she's asking like, how are you doing spiritually? And at the time, I was not doing good. I was not serving God in my heart. Um, but this is a big thing, is like all throughout those high school years that I kind of just talked about, no matter what, even if I was doing really bad, I always maintained faith. So, like, say I'm doing really bad in my relationship, if my parents ask me, "Hey Ben, how are you doing?" I just kind of straight up lie to their face, and I'm like, "Well, I'm doing good. Like, God is good. Trying to serve Him." And there were times where I was being sincere, like I really was doing good, but most of the time I was doing really bad, and I would just say like, "Oh, God's good," And so when she asked me in the car this time, she said, "Hey Ben, how are you doing?" It was like, I don't know if it was because had like kind of recently turned 18 and I was starting to feel like a man, or what. I don't know what it was specifically, but I remember thinking, I can't live my entire life as like a fraud. And that's what I had been doing, because no matter what, I would tell him I'm doing okay, even if I'm doing awful. And so I just said, like, I can't live like this for the rest of my life. And so I just told her straight up, I was like, I don't think I'm saved, mom, which was a big thing for me because I had never, like, we hear it in the Bible, like, the truth will set you free. And so in a weird, twisted way, I had felt like freedom because it was like I was no longer lying to them. At least I'm honest. Like, it sucks what I had to be honest about, and that's that I wasn't saved. But it did feel like a weight off my shoulders because it was like I don't have to put on this fake face anymore of like, oh, I'm doing great in
I,
my.
I've, I've heard, sorry to interrupt, but
Go
I've
ahead, go ahead.
actually heard Pastor Joe Campbell say, oh man, what's the quote? He pretty much just says with confession brings redemption or change.
Mm,
And it's true. I think we all can personally experience that, especially when, you know, everybody comes to that moment when they confess their sins to God and just kind of lay it all down. I think everybody has that moment with God. But continue, continue.
yeah, confession, a very powerful thing. Something even to this day that God is having to help me with because I was so bad at it in my early years. But like confession is an extremely powerful thing. But anyway, side note. Um, so I was honest with my mom and I just told her like, yeah, I don't think I'm saved. Like, and it was hard, but like I said, there was a little bit of that freedom. And so we have that conversation and the weeks go on and I continue living in how I was. I kind of already wasn't hanging out with the best group of people. Um, and so I continued doing that. And so then there came a point where it was like I kind of just slept at my house. At the time I worked swing shifts, so I was working from like 2 to 11, 2 in the afternoon to 11. And so I would go to work at 2, get off at 11, instantly go to my friend's house. I would stay there all night until like 5, 6 in the morning. And at the time we were doing like a little bit of drugs, weed, and stuff like that. And then I would go home, I would go to sleep, wake up at like 12 or 1, get ready for work, and then go to work. And like that was on repeat for like, I remember a few weeks. And so then it came to a point where it was like, okay, I'm going to have to move out. Because my parents have already told me all throughout my high school years, like, they're not going to allow certain things. And rightfully so to them. Like, they can't just let certain things go on under their roof in their household
The parents.
and not take action, right? And so I moved pretty much before I got kicked out. And so I didn't get kicked out, but I moved right before I did. I would have probably in like the next, 2 weeks or so. So I moved out when I was 18. And then once I moved out, now it was like, now no one's over my shoulder. Now there's zero accountability, or so I think. And so now I feel like this, oh my gosh, I can do whatever I want to do. And that's what I had told my mom in the car too. When I like told her I'm not saved, it's kind of crazy thinking about it now, but I was so honest that I was just like, Mom, like, I kind of just want to have fun. That's literally the exact words I used was just, Mom, I don't want to serve God right now. I want to have fun. And
And
so then
oh,
go ahead.
during this time, what was your were you going to church, or what was your thought on church and all that?
No, I wasn't going to church at the time. And so that was kind of easier
Partially
too to
why?
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you can naturally kind of just because I haven't been going either
Right.
way.
Right.
And so then once I move out, then like I said, it's full on. Now I'm doing everything that I was, but just more of it. And then so I did smoke weed and stuff like that. Then eventually I tried my first, sip of alcohol, started that, and then I just wanted like more and more of this like party lifestyle. And then that led me to try like my first pill. And then like it just got so quick. Like the addiction and the bondage came on so quick. Um, the best way I can describe it is kind of like, I don't know if you've ever tried to eat like really healthy and like you're like super strict with it, right? Like
Yeah,
you're
like
only
the first
eating this.
2 hours.
And then like, yeah, and then this is what happens, right? After restricting all that bad stuff, like you have one Oreo.
Right.
And then you're like, oh
Like the
my
rest of
gosh, this is the greatest thing. And then you
yeah.
eat the entire package. So that's what I had done with sin. Is
Wow.
like I ate one Oreo and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm gonna eat the whole pack. Not thinking about the consequences,
Yeah.
clearly. And so
And
it would
oh, what were you,
go
what were
ahead,
you
go
saying?
ahead, go ahead.
So, and then as you're doing this, did you, you know, as you're kind of progressing, did you ever stop to look at yourself and be like, man, like how far you had come from being in church and somewhat saved to now living on your own and, being hooked on these various addictions? Did you ever stop and kind of look at yourself? And if you did, what were you thinking? What were those thoughts like?
Uh yes and no, maybe. Because like I do remember seeing like certain lines crossed. So, for example, like I remember one time very specifically, I remember one night I was partying, right? And I'm like drunk and on of assortment of other things. And I remember we were just talking about drugs and someone was like talking about cocaine. And I was like, me, all high and mighty, and my sin, I was like, I will never put something up my nose. Like, that's trashy. No way. Well, like 2 years later, one of my biggest addictions that I got on was like, I don't know if you guys know what blues are, but that's like a very heavy thing. They're like these little, they're fentanyl. I don't know if you know what fentanyl is. It's like
Heard of it.
extremely addictive uh, uh, drug. And like the way I would take them is like they come in kind of like pill form, and I would crush them and I would snort them. And so like that just goes to show like you have no boundaries in your sin. When you're the God of your own life, you set boundaries, and then if you want to cross them, you'll cross them, because like we all know he who sins is a slave to sin. So it's like you can think you're in control. And so that's why I say like I don't know if I ever was like, man, I've come so far. Like I've been raised so right, and I've come this far. But I do remember seeing my own boundaries like be broken all the time. Like I would set a little boundary, oh, I'll never do this. And then I would do it because
Mm.
I had no control. I couldn't say no to my sin. Like I didn't have a choice. I would just I would just go.
Wow.
And so yeah, so I mean I kind of lived this whole like party lifestyle and was like chasing the fun, and um we've all probably heard it before, and it's so true. Like sin is only fun for a season. And so that was another thing that I had always said, like, oh, people who do drugs to run from their pain, and like those people like need help. People are like, you know, like what's wrong with them, you know? And like because at the time I was only doing drugs to like enhance, certain things and just have fun. And I really was having fun with it, just using it to party. But then I do remember kind of a time where it switched, and I was like doing drugs to like get away from like like the pain of life. Like I had caused some very real consequences in my life. And one of those things, like here's a crazy story, is I had been on like Xanax. I was doing a lot of Xanax at the time. And like I went into my job uh like high, extremely high. And like this is the job I had gotten after being fired from like two other jobs for like kind of the same reason. And so I'm in this job, and I kind of can't remember all of it. It's very spotty night. But I remember them asking like, "Hey, let's go do a drug test. Like you're acting kind of funny, Ben." And so they took me back to do a drug test. I do remember kind of doing the drug test, and then they said, "Okay, you can go home. We'll call you in the morning when we get your drug test back." And I remember being in the car, and since I was like super high on drugs, I wasn't like extremely sad, but I remember being like, man, this like it sucks. Like I know what that drug test is gonna come back as. Like it's gonna come back positive. So in my mind, I'm like, I've already lost this job. And so I had taken a little break from these blues. Um, but then like I was just like sad about that. And so I like hit up my dealer and was like, hey, like I want some of the pills, because I just wanted to have a good time to like numb this, like I just been fired from my job, right? I remember getting them from his house, uh, and then I probably did some right there. But then the next thing I remember is being jerked awake by a cop. So what had happened was I had been driving super intoxicated with no alcohol, but just a ton of pills. And and so I had pulled over to the side of the road, put the car in park, and just passed out. Now looking back on it, this is completely God's grace and mercy, because I really do think I was ODing. Like I think I probably could have died right there, but God's grace.
Wow.
And so the cop obviously sees this car pulled over to the side of the road, comes up, sees me in there, The doors are locked, the windows are up, and he can't get me up. I'm passed out. And so what he has to do is he goes to the passenger side window and busts the door open. And I didn't even wake up at that, just to kind of show you like what state I'm in. So he busts the window open and I don't get up until he's kind of crawled in the cabin and like jerking me awake. And so that night I get a drug DUI. And so this was like another bad like consequence of my actions. And like this was not the first or the only thing that like sin did to me. It was like there was so many of these moments of just like where I would taste the fruit of sin and it was awful. And so what would I do? I would just do more drugs. Like I was blinded kind of. And you were asking, did you see yourself like drifting? I would say that like I was very blinded by my sin. And also, now looking back on it, very like extremely prideful. Because I just,
Fun at this point.
what was that? What was that?
I said you weren't having fun at this point, huh?
No, like not at all, not at all. And it's funny. I was reading the prodigal son story to kind of,
Yeah.
like just read it and see what it was saying. And like the part that stuck out to me was when he's in the like he's had all his fun, he spent his inheritance, and then he's here in like the pig pen, right? Like that's what we would call it, like the pig pen.
Yeah.
And he's like looking at their food and he's like, man, I think I might just like feast real quick, right? And the
Yeah.
reason why that stuck out to me so much is because I've said it before to some of my other friends, but it got to the point where really I knew how bad my situation was. And it was like I had like my own poop, excuse my, you know, kind of language, but it was like I had my own poop in my hands and it was like I was eating it. And then I kind of had like this mental image of like me like shaking my finger at God, and it's like I get my situation, but guess what? I'm choosing to do it and you're not telling me what to do. So that's like the kind of pride that held my life, was like I knew my situation, but I didn't want to humble myself because I want to direct my path. God, you're not going to tell me what to do. I make my own decisions, even if this is the consequences it leads to. So that's what sin will do. It'll bring you to that point. And so,
Quick question. Did you ever, when you first started, did you ever think of you getting to this point of you full blown doing all these drugs and all that? Or was it just in the beginning you just thought, oh, we're just gonna have some fun and that's it? And it just kept on going and going?
yeah, that's a great question. Um, no. Easy answer, no. Did I ever see myself kind of getting this far? No way. Um, and two, like I hadn't completely forgot about God during this time. I didn't think about him a lot, but every once in a while, because I was backslidden for about 3 years, and every once in a while during these times, I would think like, man, like I'm gonna serve God someday, but just not today. And that's like
Wow.
I think about like the devil. Like if he could have managed, like thank God for his grace and his salvation power. But like the devil really could have had me in a spot of like, you'll get saved tomorrow because you'll never reach tomorrow, because once it's tomorrow, it's today again. So like if the devil could have had me believing that I would get saved tomorrow, I think that's why the Bible says like today is the day of salvation. Like, don't push it off until tomorrow because you never know if you're going to get to that point. Like, you just heard about this one incident of me like almost ODing, but there was many times where like I probably should have died. And like, how tragic if I died in my sin. Like, how tragic. And so, no, I never saw myself like getting to that point. Because I always thought like I'm kind of gonna play around with sin and then get saved and do my own thing, which is a lie from the pit. I think it was Joe Campbell who said, is what did he say? He said sin is not something you do, but like who you become. So like sin, I think we think like sin is like this bottle and like you kind of just like, okay, I'm gonna play around with sin for a little bit and then put it down. But like sin isn't a thing, like it becomes who you are. You don't control it.
Yeah.
Like once you plant the seed and you start that, it's gonna grow. It's gonna grow until it's dealt with. And when it's dealt with, like God can do that whole process. But you can't just play around with sin and think you're gonna be okay and put it down. That's I believe that's a lie from the pit.
Um, was it? So when you were going to church and all that, um, I don't know if you don't want to talk about it or not, but what really caused you to not follow God back in the day? Like when you're in your teenage years, when you're living, you're under your parents' house, under the like the cover of having safe parents and all that. Was it just based off you just being a church kid and not wanting to, or was it sin slowly just throwing like nuggets at you, trying to knock you out, basically?
Mm. Um, I would say, making me think. This is good. Uh,
I'm doing a good job now. Thank you.
I would say that like when you're not completely surrendered. I mean, this has kind of been a theme, common theme throughout it. But when you're not surrendered, like, and you're your own God and you're making your own decisions, you're gonna do whatever you desire. And so, like I would get these little like desires, and I would just kind of want to do what I wanted to do. I'll say like the main struggle that I believe like any teenage boy has is like girls. Like and
Big
not
facts.
all
Yep.
relationships with girls are bad. I'm not saying like, oh, you talk to a girl that's like actually your friend. No, like no, like I'm not saying that at
You're gonna
all.
get kicked out for 6 months.
Yeah.
I'm saying like you just got to be careful. You got to be wise. You got to seek other people's advice on relationships you have, and also too like you just got to be careful. And so
Talk to your pastor. Talk to your
yeah,
pastor about that.
talk to a pastor
Talk
about
to
it.
a pastor, and not any pastor in your church you're going to. Because
And I
sometimes if you try to go to another pastor, oh yeah, go ahead and go do it, even though they don't know if your pastor's okay
different
with it.
answers,
That's what's up. So go to
different
your
answers.
pastor, and if he gives you an answer you don't like, suck it up and then keep moving.
Hey, God placed them in your life for a reason. 100%, I believe that. And so, yeah, and for me too, it wasn't even like I was trying to talk to a girl the right way. Most of the time, it was just like I was in contact with a girl that probably wasn't doing that good either, you know? Like, and there was a couple of females I talked to who didn't even go to church. And so it wasn't like I was trying to do things the right way or have a good relationship under a pastor or anything like that. It was just like I was trying to like talk to girls and maybe, do things with them. And so it was the whole thing. Like, you shouldn't probably have any of that. You shouldn't have any of that if you're trying to serve God. And so that was a big slip up for me in like my high school years.
Okay, so that's gonna do it for part 1, guys. Make sure to tune in for part 2. That will come out next Saturday. Before you leave, make sure you follow us, subscribe, like, share if you like this content. Follow us on Instagram. We got our merch. We have this sweet new fire. It's called Fire Edition. I think that's what we called it.
It's Spyro.
Yeah,
Get
it's
the fun. Get the fun.
I like it because it has the logo there. The t-shirts have a little logo on. Thank you, guys. Make sure you tune in for next week to hear the rest of Ben's amazing testimony. We'll see you there.